Long before breakfast cereals filled supermarket shelves and fast food restaurants appeared on every highway exit, mornings in Pennsylvania Dutch country looked very different. The day often began before sunrise. Farmers prepared for hours of labor. Animals needed feeding. Fields required attention, and families needed a breakfast capable of providing enough energy to last throughout the day. One of the most common foods on those breakfast tables was something many Americans today have never tasted: Scrapple. To modern ears, the name alone sounds unusual. The appearance can seem even more surprising: a loaf made from pork scraps, cornmeal, and spices, sliced and fried until golden brown. It is not a food that immediately appeals to everyone. Yet for generations, Scrapple was considered one of the most practical and beloved foods in Pennsylvania Dutch communities. Its story begins with the German-speaking immigrants who arrived in Pennsylvania during the 17th and 18th centuries. Many came seeking religious freedom, farmland, and new opportunities. Over time, they established farming communities that became famous for their hard work, self-sufficiency, and strong traditions. Although they became known as Pennsylvania Dutch, the word Dutch actually came from Deutsch, the German word for German. These communities brought Old World cooking traditions with them, traditions shaped by necessity. Life on the frontier could be difficult. Food could not be wasted. Every animal represented valuable resources. Every harvest mattered. Every meal served a purpose. That philosophy played a major role in the creation of Scrapple. When families butchered a hog, they used nearly every part of the animal. The most desirable cuts became ham, bacon, and other premium products. But what about everything else? Rather than throwing useful food away, Pennsylvania Dutch cooks found ways to transform leftovers into something nourishing. Various cuts of pork were boiled until tender. The meat was chopped finely. Cornmeal and spices were added. The mixture was poured into molds and allowed to cool into firm loaves. Later, slices could be fried in a skillet and served alongside eggs, potatoes, or bread. The result was inexpensive, filling, and surprisingly flavorful. More importantly, it reflected the values of the people who created it. Waste nothing. Use everything. Work hard. Make the most of what you have. For generations, these principles helped Pennsylvania Dutch communities thrive. Scrapple became especially popular because it was practical. Farm families often needed substantial breakfasts before beginning long days of physical labor. A few slices of Scrapple could provide calories, protein, and energy without requiring expensive ingredients. It was exactly the kind of food that made sense in a farming society. As Pennsylvania developed during the 19th century, Scrapple spread beyond its original communities. Markets sold it. Local butchers produced it. Restaurants added it to breakfast menus. For many people across Pennsylvania, Maryland, Delaware, and parts of New Jersey, it became a familiar part of daily life. Yet outside those regions, Scrapple remained largely unknown. Its unusual ingredients and appearance often confused newcomers. Some loved it immediately. Others never developed a taste for it. Even today, opinions remain divided. What nobody debates, however, is its importance to regional food history. Scrapple tells a story far larger than breakfast. It tells the story of immigrant communities adapting to a new land. It tells the story of farming families making every resource count. And it tells the story of a time when practicality often mattered more than presentation. As the 20th century progressed, American eating habits changed dramatically. Industrial food production expanded. National brands became household names. Traditional regional foods began disappearing from many dinner tables. Some survived, others slowly faded into memory. Scrapple managed to endure. Today, it remains one of the most recognizable foods associated with Pennsylvania Dutch culture. In places like Lancaster County, local diners still serve it. Family recipes continue passing from one generation to the next, and devoted fans still argue about the best way to fry it: crispy, soft, thin-sliced, or thick-cut. But perhaps the most remarkable thing about Scrapple is not its flavor. It is the history contained within every slice. A history of immigrants, farmers, families, and communities that believed nothing should be wasted. In an age where convenience often dominates the kitchen, Scrapple remains a reminder of a different America. An America built on resourcefulness, hard work, and the ability to transform simple ingredients into traditions that survive for centuries. When most Americans hear the words chicken pot pie, they imagine a familiar dish: a flaky crust, a creamy filling, vegetables and chicken baked together inside a pie shell. But in Pennsylvania Dutch country, chicken pot pie meant something entirely different. In fact, many visitors are surprised to discover that the traditional Pennsylvania Dutch version often contains no pie crust at all. Instead, it resembles a rich chicken stew filled with large homemade noodles. For generations, this hearty meal occupied a special place in Pennsylvania Dutch kitchens, and like many forgotten regional foods, its origins tell a story of practicality, community, and survival. The roots of the dish can be traced back to German immigrants who settled throughout Pennsylvania during the 18th century. Many arrived with recipes and cooking traditions passed down through generations. These traditions adapted over time as families learned to work with ingredients available in the New World. What emerged was a unique regional cuisine unlike anything found elsewhere in America. Pennsylvania Dutch chicken pot pie became one of its defining dishes. The recipe itself was simple. A whole chicken was slowly simmered in water to create a rich broth. Vegetables such as potatoes, celery, and onions were often added. Then came the most important ingredient: the noodles. Known locally as pot pie squares, these thick homemade noodles were rolled by hand and cut into large rectangles before being dropped into the simmering broth. As they cooked, they absorbed flavor and helped transform a simple soup into a filling family meal. For many rural households, meals needed to accomplish more than simply taste good. They needed to feed large families. Farm life required tremendous physical effort. Men worked fields from sunrise to sunset. Women managed households, gardens, and countless daily responsibilities. Children often contributed as well. A substantial meal provided the energy necessary to keep everything running. Pennsylvania Dutch chicken pot pie excelled at that task. One pot could feed many people. The ingredients were affordable, and the recipe could easily be adjusted depending on what ingredients were available. This flexibility helped explain its popularity. No two families prepared it exactly the same way. Some preferred thicker noodles, others added more vegetables. Different communities developed their own variations, yet the basic idea remained unchanged: a nourishing meal designed to bring people together. The dish also became closely associated with community gatherings, church suppers, harvest celebrations, family reunions. Large pots of chicken pot pie often appeared wherever people gathered. Food has always played an important role in building communities, and few dishes served that purpose better. As America modernized during the 20th century, regional recipes began facing new competition. National food brands expanded. Restaurants introduced standardized menus. Mass-produced convenience foods entered American kitchens. Gradually, many local traditions started disappearing. Pennsylvania Dutch chicken pot pie survived, but mostly within the communities that created it. Outside the region, most Americans continued associating pot pie with the baked version found in supermarkets and restaurants. The Pennsylvania Dutch interpretation became something of a hidden culinary treasure. Today, visitors to Lancaster County and surrounding areas still encounter the dish in family restaurants, church events, and local diners. Many discover it by accident. They order chicken pot pie expecting one thing and receive something entirely different. Yet that surprise often becomes part of the experience. Because the dish represents more than a recipe. It represents a culture, a history, a way of life built around family, hard work, and community. Like so many forgotten American foods, Pennsylvania Dutch chicken pot pie reminds us that local history can still be found in the foods people choose to remember. Long before Americans filled their sandwiches with mass-produced deli meats, communities across Pennsylvania enjoyed something far more distinctive. It was dark in color, slightly smoky, noticeably tangy, and unlike almost anything found in modern supermarkets. Its name was Lebanon Bologna. Today, it remains one of Pennsylvania's most recognizable regional foods. Yet outside the mid-Atlantic states, many Americans have never even heard of it. For generations, however, Lebanon Bologna was a familiar sight in homes, markets, and lunch pails throughout the region. Its story begins with the German immigrants who helped shape Pennsylvania Dutch culture. When these settlers arrived in America during the 18th century, they brought with them centuries of knowledge about preserving meat. Refrigeration did not exist. If food was going to last through the winter, people needed reliable preservation methods. Smoking, curing, drying. These techniques often determined whether a family would have enough food during difficult months. Lebanon Bologna emerged from those traditions. Despite its name, it differs greatly from the bologna most Americans know today. Modern bologna is typically mild, soft, and uniform in texture. Lebanon bologna is stronger, bolder, more complex. Made primarily from beef, heavily seasoned, fermented, and smoked, it developed a flavor that reflected the old-world preservation methods brought by German settlers. The town of Lebanon, Pennsylvania, became closely associated with its production, eventually lending its name to the product itself. As the 19th century progressed, the popularity of Lebanon bologna spread throughout the region. Local butchers produced their own versions. Families purchased it at markets. Workers packed slices into lunches before heading to farms, factories, and workshops. Part of its success came from practicality. The smoking process helped preserve the meat. The flavor was distinctive, and it could be stored longer than many fresh products available at the time. In rural communities, these advantages mattered enormously. Food was not simply about taste, it was about reliability. A food that lasted longer often became a food people trusted. As Pennsylvania's economy expanded, Lebanon bologna grew alongside it. Railroads connected towns, markets became larger, local specialties reached new customers. Yet despite this growth, the product remained deeply connected to its regional roots. It never became a truly national food. Instead, it remained something special, something tied to Pennsylvania Dutch identity. And perhaps that exclusivity helped preserve its appeal. The 20th century brought dramatic changes to American eating habits. National brands began dominating grocery stores. Industrial food production expanded rapidly. Consumers gained access to products from every corner of the country. Many regional foods struggled to survive this transformation. Some disappeared entirely. Others became little more than memories. Lebanon Bologna managed to endure, partly because local producers remained committed to traditional methods, partly because generations of Pennsylvanians continued supporting it, and partly because its flavor was difficult to replace. People who grew up eating Lebanon Bologna often developed a lifelong attachment to it. For them, it represented more than food. It represented home, family, community. Today, visitors exploring Pennsylvania Dutch country can still find Lebanon Bologna in markets, specialty stores, and traditional restaurants. Some producers continue using methods passed down through generations. The flavor remains unmistakable, smoky, tangy, distinctly Pennsylvanian. And that may be the most remarkable thing about Lebanon Bologna. In a world where so many foods have become standardized and predictable, it remains proudly regional. A reminder that American food history was once far more diverse than many people realize. Long before national chains and supermarket brands dominated the landscape, communities created foods that reflected their own traditions, environments, and values. Lebanon Bologna is one of those foods, a surviving piece of Pennsylvania Dutch history, and a delicious reminder that some of America's most interesting culinary stories are still hiding in plain sight. Of all the forgotten Pennsylvania Dutch foods on this list, Chow Chow may have the strangest name. Ask most Americans today what Chow Chow is, and many won't have an answer. Some might assume it's a pet's nickname. Others may think it's a completely different type of food. Yet for generations throughout Pennsylvania Dutch country, Chow Chow was a common sight on dinner tables and in kitchen pantries. Not because it was a main course, but because it helped solve a problem that every farming family eventually faced. What do you do with vegetables that won't last through winter? Before refrigeration, this question mattered far more than it does today. A successful harvest was a blessing, but it also created challenges. Farmers often produced more vegetables than they could immediately eat. If those vegetables spoiled, valuable food would be lost. And in rural communities, wasting food was something people tried very hard to avoid. Pennsylvania Dutch families became experts at preservation, drying, smoking, canning, pickling. Every method helped extend the life of food beyond harvest season. Chow Chow emerged from that tradition. The recipe varied from family to family, which is one reason historians still debate its exact origins. In most versions, a variety of vegetables were chopped and preserved in a sweet and sour brine. Cabbage, cauliflower, beans, carrots, corn, peppers, green tomatoes. Almost anything from the garden could find its way into a jar of Chow Chow. That flexibility became one of its greatest strengths. Rather than allowing leftover vegetables to go to waste, families could preserve them for future meals. The result was colorful, flavorful, and surprisingly practical. As winter approached and fresh produce became scarce, jars of Chow Chow remained available. A small serving could add flavor and variety to otherwise simple meals. For many families, that mattered enormously. Rural life often revolved around seasonal cycles. Summer brought abundance, winter demanded careful planning. Foods that helped bridge the gap between those seasons became highly valued. Chow Chow was one of them. It frequently appeared alongside beans, meats, potatoes, and other staples of Pennsylvania Dutch cooking. The sharp, tangy flavor complemented heavier dishes beautifully. Some families served it almost every day, others reserved it for special meals. But across much of Pennsylvania Dutch country, it became a familiar part of daily life. The popularity of Chow Chow also reflected a broader philosophy, one that appears repeatedly throughout Pennsylvania Dutch food history. Use what you have, waste as little as possible, prepare for the future. These principles helped generations of farming families survive uncertain times. Good harvests could not be taken for granted. Weather was unpredictable. Markets fluctuated. Economic hardship could arrive with little warning. Preserving food was not simply a hobby, it was a form of security. As America modernized during the 20th century, many of these traditions began fading. Supermarkets provided year-round access to fresh produce. Commercial food production expanded. Fewer families depended on home gardens for survival. The practical need for recipes like Chow Chow gradually declined, and with that decline came a loss of familiarity. Younger generations often grew up without learning traditional preservation techniques. Old recipes remained tucked away in family cookbooks. Some disappeared altogether. Yet Chow Chow never vanished completely. In parts of Pennsylvania, it remains a cherished tradition. Local markets still sell it. Family recipes continue passing from one generation to the next. Visitors exploring Pennsylvania Dutch country can still find jars lining store shelves. For many people, it serves as a connection to the past, a reminder of grandparents who worked the land, a reminder of harvest seasons and family kitchens, a reminder of a time when preserving food required patience, knowledge, and effort. Today, Chow Chow may seem unusual, but its story represents something universal: the desire to make the most of what we have, the determination to prepare for difficult times, and the creativity people often display when faced with limited resources. Like so many forgotten foods, Chow Chow is more than a recipe. It is a small piece of history preserved inside a jar. A simple tradition that helped generations of Pennsylvania Dutch families make it through another winter. Of all the foods associated with Pennsylvania Dutch culture, none may be more famous than Shoofly Pie. Even people who know very little about Pennsylvania Dutch history have often heard its unusual name. Yet, despite its reputation, few Americans today understand how important this humble dessert once was. Long before it became a tourist attraction in Lancaster County bakeries, Shoofly Pie served a much more practical purpose. It was affordable, it was filling, and perhaps most importantly, it could be made using ingredients that were available throughout much of the year. Its story begins with one ingredient that shaped countless American kitchens during the 19th century: molasses. Before refined white sugar became inexpensive and widely available, molasses served as one of the most common sweeteners in the United States. It was affordable, it stored well, and it provided a rich, distinctive flavor that appeared in everything from baked goods to sauces. For many Pennsylvania Dutch families, molasses was a pantry staple. Naturally, it eventually found its way into pie recipes. The exact origins of Shoofly Pie remain debated. Food historians have proposed several theories. Some believe the pie evolved from traditional European crumb cakes brought by German immigrants. Others point to recipes that appeared in Pennsylvania during the 19th century. Whatever its precise origin, by the late 1800s, the dessert had become firmly established throughout Pennsylvania Dutch country. The recipe was surprisingly simple. A pie crust formed the base. A mixture of molasses, water, and baking soda created the filling. A crumb topping made from flour, butter, and brown sugar covered the surface. As the pie baked, something remarkable happened. The ingredients separated into layers. A rich molasses filling settled beneath a sweet crumb topping. The result was a dessert unlike almost anything else in American baking. Its flavor was deep, sweet, slightly smoky, and instantly recognizable. The unusual name has generated countless stories over the years. One popular explanation claims that flies were constantly attracted to the sweet molasses filling while pies cooled on windowsills. Bakers supposedly had to shoo the flies away, hence the name Shoofly Pie. Whether the story is entirely true remains uncertain, but the image proved memorable enough to survive for generations. Like many Pennsylvania Dutch foods, Shoofly Pie reflected a culture built around practicality. Ingredients were chosen carefully. Waste was discouraged. Recipes needed to provide value as well as flavor. Some families even ate shoofly pie for breakfast alongside coffee, rather than reserving it exclusively for dessert. To modern audiences, that may seem unusual. To earlier generations, it made perfect sense. A filling slice of pie could provide energy for a long day of farm work. And in rural communities, practicality often outweighed convention. As Pennsylvania Dutch communities grew and prospered, shoofly pie became more than just a household recipe. It became a symbol of regional identity. Visitors arriving in southeastern Pennsylvania quickly discovered its popularity. Bakeries sold it, markets displayed it, cookbooks featured it prominently. The pie became one of the most recognizable foods associated with Pennsylvania Dutch culture. Yet, like many traditional recipes, it faced challenges during the 20th century. Changing tastes, industrial food production, new dessert trends, all contributed to the decline of many regional foods. Some disappeared entirely. Shoofly pie survived, partly because of tourism, partly because of tradition, and partly because generations of families continued baking it at home. Today, visitors traveling through Lancaster County can still find shoofly pie in bakeries, diners, and local shops. Many discover it for the first time. Others return seeking a familiar taste from childhood. Either way, the pie continues doing what it has done for more than a century, connecting people to the past. And perhaps that is the perfect way to conclude our journey through forgotten Pennsylvania Dutch foods. Because every dish we've explored tells a similar story. A story of immigrants building new lives. A story of farming communities shaped by hard work and resourcefulness. A story of traditions passed from one generation to the next. Scrapple, chicken pot pie, Lebanon Bologna, Chow Chow, Shoofly Pie. 5 foods that once played an important role in everyday American life. Some remain popular. Others survive only in certain regions. Yet all of them remind us that America's food history is far richer and more diverse than many people realize. These dishes were more than meals, they were traditions. And like the people who created them, They deserved to be remembered.